Hello everyone, welcome to APUSH Simplified. Today we're looking at a major Period 2 topic, the First Great Awakening, and a primary source central to that topic, Jonathan Edwards' sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. To start, let's take a look at the First Great Awakening. Roughly the time period of the Great Awakening goes from the 1730s to the 1770s. We will mostly focus on the impacts in colonial America, but note that this is also an international movement, as it is also occurring across Europe, which shows an example of the transatlantic exchange of ideas. Core to the Great Awakening is the revitalization of religious piety. Some may say it is a counter to the more secular Enlightenment movement amongst educated elites, and at the very least, it runs concurrent to it. Another major facet of the First Great Awakening is the distinction between the Old Light preachers, who are more likely to be longtime hometown ministers and offer a more conservative or moderate style and content to their sermons, versus the New Light preachers, who are a major part of the First Great Awakening. They were more likely to be traveling preachers that attracted huge crowds to their sermons, which were filled with raucous hellfire and brimstone-style oration, and many times the crowds would participate with shouts along the lines of, "Save me." Two of the major New Light preachers you might see on the AP tests are Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield, both of whom spoke of terrifying images of the corruption of human nature and terrors awaiting unbelievers and sinners who did not repent. Also, the First Great Awakening is an excellent example of Protestant evangelism, or the practice of spreading of Christianity. In Period 1, we talked a lot about how the Roman Catholic Church had major goals of spreading Christianity. For Protestants, the First Great Awakening is an example for them. And finally, the First Great Awakening and the traveling New Light preachers were particularly popular in the rural backcountry across colonial America. Okay, let's briefly touch upon Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. For APUSH, we do not need to do a deep dive on the content or literary aspects of the reading, so this will be brief. To begin, this is considered the hallmark sermon of the First Great Awakening, and it encapsulates many of the Great Awakening's core ideas. In the sermon itself, there is a lot of discussion of how the wicked or sinners deserve to be in hell, and at any moment, God can or will send them there. However, God has some restraint and gives many people the time to save themselves by accepting Jesus Christ and repenting their sins. Edwards delivers his sermon at the invitation of a Connecticut preacher who was worried about his congregation, and so Edwards' purpose was to teach about how sin and rejection of Christ can lead to the horrors of hell. It is important to note the whole thing is not just about the negative consequence of hell, but Edwards balances it out with the prospect of salvation. And in other speeches, Edwards has a lot to say about heaven, but those are not as widely known or read. Lastly, the legacy. There is an argument that the First Great Awakening helped usher in the revolution because it showed how more people turned away from traditional authorities. You just need to sub out Old Light preachers for British government officials, and to a lesser extent, away from the Anglican Church of England, as the First Great Awakening was able to attract converts to Methodist and Baptist churches. However, most colonists were not in the Anglican Church beforehand. Finally, an important side note, there will be more Great Awakenings, and of special importance is the Second Great Awakening, which is a major event in Period 4. However, the Second Great Awakening will look very different from the first, and will have very different effects. Okay, that does it for the First Great Awakening and Jonathan Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing with classmates or fellow teachers. The upcoming school year is going to be an interesting one, with many going to distance learning or hybrid models, and these videos could be a great aid in those settings.